So today I will be presenting research that has evolved in the last month and a half on how DIY or do-it-yourself iterations of the facial masks challenge and rewrite narratives on cultural identity and relationships with the natural and social environment. Last month, my colleague Vera Blinova and I had presented research in non-traditional and nature-inspired facial accessories, where we showcased two Russian individuals' work of this theme. That of Vera's work in making one of her gas masks, as she has a hobby of collecting them, into a less threatening and colorful device, and the other belonging to a Moscow-based creator named Katya Molchanova. Today so in the absence of my colleague, I can't really speak for Vera's affinity to her gas masks, but I would like to introduce here a brief contextualization of the mask in Russian cultural history. Apart from its role as a preventative device issued during the Cold War, gas masks had been featured in Russian theater productions as early as 1913. And the center image here presents a few illustrations by Kazimir Malevich for the futurist opera Victory Over the Sun. In his journal article, Masks of the Poet, Myths of the People, UC Berkeley scholar Dr. Harsha Ram examines Russian mythologies, literature, and cultural attitudes reflected in its theatrical productions and costume. Greek theater traditions of Dionysus and Italian commedia dell'arte contributed to the formation of Russian theater masks, where it evolved to reflect its own nation's philosophical and sociocultural roots. Additionally, 20th century Russian philosopher Mikhail Bakhtin's work on the grotesque and carnival in Rabelais and His World adds critical insight into Russian narratives of mask wearing. Intended to or not, there are consequences of wearing a facial device like the mask, whether it's been featured in steampunk attire and festival wear or for practical means in toxic environments. Such an item shields part or all of the human face that challenges reading emotional and nonverbal facial cues. Before I delve into introducing Katya's nature-inspired facial wear, I want to share an excerpt from Vanessa Friedman's New York Times article in March called "The Mask," which I found to be an invaluable source of understanding the history of the surgical mask's appropriation in Western fashion, when I first began this research with Vera pre-quarantine. Friedman suggests the mask is a device of sartorial bricolage. From its conventional use of isolating oneself from others during pandemics, today it re-signifies as a gesture of community. This statement, gesture of community, was central to our research, as Vera and I saw fit to title our presentation Redefining Approachability. Questions arose like, what does being approachable in public mean when wearing the medical mask? Or how is a makeshift nose and mouth covering read by others? Our work took it to the extreme when we presented how a provocative item like the gas mask has the potential to be restyled to seem less intimidating. My interest focuses on the quote-unquote mask stripped of its cloth, and that is read as a tool to conduct introspective work and experimentation in fashioning the body and accessorizing the face with unconventional items. As designers and artists adapt to a lifestyle that has encouraged them to stay home in the last few months, some have sought inspiration from the natural environment as they refashion their closets and their art practices. One such performer is a 25-year-old Moscow-based art director named Katya Molchanova, whose practice for over 5 years now involves self-portraits that feature materials found in nature, reworking them into flower masks, petal tongues, and radish appendages, to name a few, onto her own body. Her work showcases interest in anonymity, hybrid creatures, beauty routines, and the relationship between her and her natural environment. In an interview with Italian Vogue, she recounts her childhood as a source of inspiration, of playing with friends and attaching okopnik, the Russian word for comfrey, an herb with healing properties, to their clothes. And I'd like to show just this photo of the portrait of her attaching this flower to facial wear. Her play with flowers and vegetables can be read as creating compositions of hybrid identities and characters in collecting elements from her natural environment. At first look, this seems to be a frivolous hobby, but it can also be interpreted as play as work, of storytelling and as a practice of invoking nostalgia. Katya cites as her mentor and a source of inspiration Preeti Tiemann, who, let me see if I can pull up here. Preeti Tiemann, a Berlin-based artist and professor, also from Moscow, whose art installations deal with semiotics, science, and surrealism, a method he developed based on ritual, science, and surrealist art ideology. I found Katya's work intriguing to showcase, as self-portraiture is often seen as self-important, which it certainly may be, but I'd argue that her use of foliage found in her backyard and careful styling hybrid looks of leaf nails and petal lips, inspiring as thoughtful and poetic work, worthy of critical examination. I don't find her work to be necessarily glamorous. In fact, some of her pieces may cause anxiety if you have trypophobia. Her portraits and close-ups of hands, eyes, and mouths, collaged with plant appendages, appears unnerving, and she is surgical in her approach. This is where I think Bakhtinian theories of the grotesque body can be applied to. And I've shown a lot of images and touched upon several themes here, but the thing that brings it all together for me was that even when homebound, innovators can tap into resources they wouldn't necessarily consider in their art practices. Self-portraiture and fashioning facial wear, in Katya's case, can lead into new meanings of how one relates to oneself as an extension of their environment. And if you're interested in looking into alternative face wear, headpieces and adornments, I've listed just a couple of Instagram accounts that have compiled a variety of otherworldly masks made with innovative material. Thank you.
Katya, thank you so much for the fantastic example. Yeah,
Okay.
so actually I haven't heard about this artist. So yeah, thank you so much for this perspective. Comments and questions? Okay. Right. Seems like Yana says, love this work. And yes, and actually Yana Milkumova Reynolds says she would be inclined to read this through Donna Haraway's ideas. What do you think?
I'm not familiar with Donna Haraway, but I'm definitely going to write this down as something to bring into this topic. Yeah, I'm very interested in how theory would be applied to natural elemental face wear other than cloth masks. So, yeah.
Yeah, and Teresa Winge, well, praises you on excellent research and asks to share bibliography references if possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I can show that really briefly if anyone wants to take a snapshot of that. Here we go. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, and there is a question. From Caroline Eleanowitz Hess. Have you considered the gendered aspect of the use of nature?
No, I haven't. But you know, I haven't. No, but I think there's definitely something to say with that.
Yeah, and Elizabeth Fisher adds to this. Check out Villa Medici fashion research resident Jean Vice-Rial, I hope I pronounced correctly, who did a mask project with natural elements during confinement. So have a look in the chat. There are some references. There are some notes on your presentation. Right.
Awesome, thank you.
Wild and Kate Elsa Skjold suggests Kate Fletcher wild dress. So yeah. Yeah, thank you so much. Colleague. Okay, thank you so much for your presentation, Katie, and colleagues. Thank you so much for ideas. Caroline also suggests to look at the 19th century illustrator J.J. Granville. Right. Okay.